The biggest difference between my game and the shooters of the old are the power-ups players earn in my game. These power-ups are weapons you can use directly against enemies, amplifiers that affect existing power-ups in one way or another, and other kinds of defensive items I haven't quite figured out as of yet. I call these things modifiers. They're basically cards you can pick up and choose during level ups that change your ship's abilities in some drastic way. You can carry up to 5 modifiers at any given time, and power up existing modifiers to increase their power levels. All in all, I hope to have at least around 20 modifiers in the game, ranging from basic weapons to crazy time manipulation tools. I don't think it would be too much to say that it is the modifiers that constitute the beating heart of this gameplay experience. It allows people to seek for very particular kinds of power-ups to create builds that function very specifically, like focusing to produce as much damage at close range as possible while building defenses that counteract the potential damage close quarter combat can inflict on the player. Conversely, you can focus on having long distance weapons with really high rates of fire and movement related power-ups. Having said all of that, in a perfect world where I finish like 6 to 7 complete levels for this game, the idea would be to present a variety of different kinds of challenges that would allow players to experiment with modifiers to create builds that work effectively to suppress the challenges these levels would present individually. Whether that's highly armored enemies with intense firepower, massive clusters of weak but fast enemies, or something completely different, there should be a solution available in the form of these modifiers. That means creating rules that limit any single weapon from being the best possible solution for every situation. Then there's just the visual feedback of using these modifiers. Using any weapon or tool should feel fun, and especially in the case of weapons, shooting them should have a visceral sense to it. Probably easier said than done, but one can always hope, right? So far, I have about 5 modifiers done for the game. That's about 25% from the goal of having 20 modifiers in the game in total. That is to say, so far so good, right? Each of these modifiers is quite different from one another, so that's good. Let me show what I've got done so far and explain how they fit in the different categories of modifiers in the game. We'll start off with Hailstorm Cannon. This is probably the first modifier that I ever created for the game. This weapon is probably one of the most basic and direct weapons in the game. It's something that stacks over your default cannon, and basically what it does is add extra bullets to every shot you make. These bullets spread out of the tip of the ship to cover large areas ahead of the ship, like the spread weapon in Contra. At higher levels, more bullets are added into the shot. Eventually, you can also shoot behind the ship for maximal coverage and security. Probably one of the simplest modifiers to use and understand. Works well in all cases, but lacks firepower. Next, we've got the Raphael Repeater. So far, one of my favorite modifiers in the game. The idea is absolutely stolen from Axelay on the Super Nintendo, and I don't really understand why others haven't really used this weapon in their own shoot-'em-ups since then. This weapon allows players to fire around the ship almost in 360 degrees. Pressing down on the fire button begins the firing salvo from the front of the ship, and as the button is held, the firing begins to transfer from shooting ahead to circling around the entire ship. Once the fire button is released, the firing moves back to the front. So what you basically have is the ability to control your fire around the ship, which makes the Raphael Repeater a really good weapon for deflecting small and fast enemies, mines, and other hazards. Increasing the level of this modifier increases the fire rate, distance, and power. Next, we've got the Celestial Scythe. This modifier is almost a melee weapon. As such, it doesn't have much of a reach, but it yields tons of damage and can also destroy enemy bullets. The strike originates from the top of the ship and arcs in front of it. The weapon can seem quite hard to use, but leveling it up increases its reach and range. It also increases the damage output considerably. One of the single strongest weapons in the game right now. Wrath is a passive modifier that requires no input from the player. Instead, this modifier is a defensive weapon that automatically attacks the closest enemy with a bolt of energy. The weapon can attack up to 3 enemies in a single shot, dividing its damage amongst the affected enemies. Wrath can be quite destructive against a singular enemy, but a swarm of enemies can quickly dilate its power. Wrath increases its firepower, range, and the number of enemies it can attack simultaneously with a single bolt the more it levels up. Ever since Jesse Ventura, Minnesota's ex-governor and a self-proclaimed sexual tyrannosaurus, got a hole blown through his chest by a predator, I've been utterly blown away by the pure testosterone-dripping weapon that is the purest expression of beautiful, destructive manliness. We're of course talking about the minigun. Now, there's realistically no way anyone would actually carry a minigun into a Central American jungle to have a gunfight, but that's besides the point. Ever since watching Arnie and the boys execute a buzz cut in the jungle, I've wanted to see this gun in a game. And since I'm making one, you better bet your ass I'm including it as a modifier. So here's a few details. This weapon is a hit scan, meaning the bullet travels instantly across the screen and hits anything in the line of fire. It had to be this way, makes it seem like a real gun instead of a silly laser weapon from a kid's show. I also added a wind-up moment just before the gun starts shooting. The shots start off slow, but the fire rate increases the longer you press the fire button down. Eventually, the cannon will overheat if you don't allow it to cool down. The weapon does take some time to get really fast, but once it does, it can dish out considerable damage to a very precise area really quickly. I like everything about this weapon, even the fact that it's a bit hard to use because of the wind-up time and overheating. Still, I can't get enough of the empty shell casings flying out of the ship and the sense of drilling into the enemy with all the impact effects. The minigun is a great weapon that still needs a bit of balancing work to make it feel just right. Anyway, that's the modifiers in the game right now. I've got more ideas I want to implement, like a missile system that targets more and more enemies the longer you keep the firing button down. Once you release it, the missiles are launched and they home into the enemies. Then there's the idea of having a kamikaze modifier. Basically, you generate this massive blast from your ship that engulfs the entire screen in flames. Doing so costs a single health point, but also causes massive damage on anything and everything on the screen. You do have to charge it up though, and doing so takes about 5 seconds. During that time, you can't shoot, and if you get hit, the time goes back to 0. I've got plenty more ideas, but I also need to work on the first level and try to get that done too. So that's what I will focus on now, and maybe try and implement the kamikaze feature on the side, since that seems like it would be really easy to do. Also, if you're Japanese and you feel it's a bit insensitive to use that term, kamikaze, just let me know. My intention isn't to be insulting at all with that. If you're a white Westerner who feels very strongly about stuff like this and can't wait to educate others about it, feel free to keep your opinions to yourself. Nobody cares, and I can't stand people who take it upon themselves to be offended by proxy. Just go LARP a Dementor somewhere else, alright? Anyway, making videos takes a lot of time, and I need to get back to working on the project. So I'm gonna go. Thanks for showing up. Please consider supporting the channel with a like, subscribe if you like what you're seeing, and please go after your dreams, even if it's just starting out small and doing the tiniest of things to move forward. Great journeys start with a single step, and I don't think there's ever been a better time to go on your own way. And with that, my name is Chris. You've been watching Tech Dad Impact. I'll see you in the next video. I'm out.